I just want to say this because it helps shape like what you just said early on when we were dating, or I thought I was dating. I don't know if she was there yet. Some persuading to do.
That happens a lot.
That was my aim. I remember she asked me a similar question you asked me the first, like if you could do anything, what would you do? And at the time I was like, I think I would go back to teaching. And she's like, yeah, I love that. Like I'd support whatever you do. And it's the idea of finding not just partners, but like circles of people that like see and want to support your vision, don't ask you to compromise. And I think that's a really good thing for anyone who's trying to accomplish stuff, to have someone that doesn't ask them to be something they're not.
Welcome. You are listening to Season 2 of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast, a podcast that exists to inspire legitimate and authentic leadership in the workplace and beyond, and I'm your host, Tim G. Williams. Now, here in Season 2, our theme is Making the Leap. You may call it leveling up, uncharted territory, or expanding your reach. It's those times in our life and our careers when we take on a new challenge. You'll discover how you can successfully navigate your own huge leaps as you hear stories from me and others. This season, I'm excited to be interviewing some exceptional leaders from a variety of fields who'll share some of the big leaps they've made. You'll get a glimpse into what's enabled both their professional and personal success. Now, a quick housekeeping note. If you're finding this podcast useful, remember to subscribe and be sure to leave a rating or review. Welcome into another edition of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Tim G. Williams, and once again, I'm excited to have an outstanding guest in studio with me today. Recently, I posted on LinkedIn, and I said that leadership is universal. And we've had a police chief on, we've had a CEO, we've had people in business, board work, and now we have you, my man, Justin Henry. Let me introduce Justin to the listening audience. Those of you who are maybe Dallasites, then you might know that name. You're like, where do I know that name, Justin Henry, from? You're going to understand in just a little bit. So Justin is a senior counsel at McKesson Corporation. Prior to joining McKesson, Justin was a corporate attorney at Baker Botts LLP, in-house legal counsel at Dental One Partners LLC, and in-house legal counsel at NTE Mobility Partners. We hit all the alphabet just now. And he began his legal career as a finance attorney at Vincent & Elkins LLP. Prior to his legal career, he taught middle school math in Los Angeles, California. Justin also served on the Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees and was elected to this role in June of 2018. He served as the board president of the board for 4 of the 6 years that he served. He is an advisory board member for UT, that's University of Texas, Southwestern Medical Center, and serves on the Regional Advisory Committee for the Jackie Robinson Foundation, whose mission is to provide scholarships and leadership development opportunities for students of color with limited financial resources, the same foundation that provided the financial backing for his undergraduate degree. Justin received his JD with honors from UT Austin, a master's of secondary education from Loyola Marymount University, and an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from UT Austin as well. Justin is married to Chastity Wilson Henry, and who's also an attorney, and they've got 2 children, Maya and Alexander, 11 and 8 years old, respectively. Justin, it's awesome to have you here today, my brother.
It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So we have a few things in common.
Okay.
One, we are Texas guys. We grew up in this state, but we lived out in California for a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. Second of which, we both are married with 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Both of our kids, yours are still in soccer. One of mine was very active in soccer for a number of years. And then the place where my mom goes to church, you grew up going to church there. So a lot of things in common for sure. Anything else you want to say about your bio before we kind of jump into what we got today?
No, I have to correct the record, and my daughter's going to call me out on it if she ever sees it, but she turned 12 in June, so I need to update my bio that I send out to people, but my daughter's 12. But no, everything else is, that's it.
Okay, awesome. So I've asked this question to each of the last few people that's come through, which is, if you could have your dream job, an interim job for 1 week, you get the chance to kind of run it, see it, do everything you can for 1 week.
Yeah.
What is that job for you, Justin?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. I think that week part is a tough one. There's a lot of jobs I'd love to do, but if I only had a week, and I think only my wife, my mom, and my dad would know this, but I would fly a fighter jet. Yep. I grew up loving fighter jets. I guess Top Gun was a movie that came out when I was younger, and I just became fascinated, man. My dad would take me to air shows, or he would take me close to air shows. So you have to pay to get in, but you can still see the activity in the air.
Yeah.
So like the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels. As a child, I always wanted to be a pilot. I went to the Air Force Academy actually out of high school for a visit. I don't even remember how I got up there.
Okay.
and it was too much structure for me. I think what I was used to as a high school student, I saw the structure, like, I don't think this is how I envision college. So that's something I would do for a week.
Fighter jet.
Yeah.
Man, that's
I'll
awesome.
fly a F-18 probably.
Okay.
They let me get in there.
I
If
love
I can
that.
survive.
That's original.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the Top Gun, especially the most recent one that came out
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's very inspirational, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's action,
Yeah.
right? For those of us
I
who
love
like
the new
that.
one too. Yeah, I love the
Yeah.
new one.
All right, so I actually want to make reference to something that's sitting for those of you who are watching on YouTube or your online platform. You can see that there's a hat in front of Justin. And I want you to talk about what I read in your bio, the impact of the Jackie Robinson Scholarship. Can you talk about the impact it made on you then as a student and now as a grown adult?
Yeah. I'm glad we start there because that's very meaningful just for our whole family. When I look at where my nuclear family is right now, that's, I don't want to use a cliche, but it's life-changing. In the moment, no, I just needed the money. I'm going to be transparent. We're thinking about how do we afford to go to college. We, the family, me and my mom and my dad, and literally sent that scholarship in the day before the deadline, waiting, received it. And so practically it allowed me to feel like I could afford the school that I wanted to go to. The piece that I didn't expect, and I would give them the money back right now if they asked for it. The piece that I didn't expect was just the I won't say just leadership development, but the leadership development, the character development. Part of the Jackie Robinson Foundation program is they take the scholars out, and these scholars are from all over rural Alabama, inner city, like students that just need a little bit of help, like we all do, I think. So they take you to New York, and you have a few days, and you're in this training. So I'm a Texas kid. I'd never been to New York. So I'm flying up to New York, I'm getting off, and you're in the airport in New York, and it's a whole different setup. I remember just being like intimidated. But I think, it exposed me to things that I hadn't been exposed to before. There was really this emphasis on service and making an impact. One of the famous sayings Jackie Robinson said is, life is only important to the extent it has impact on others. And that's something I still live by to this day. And it's one thing to talk about it, but I would sit in sessions. We had these family sessions that Rachel, who I would love to talk about at some point, would sit in on. You would talk about what you've been doing the last year, how your grades are going, how it's working socially, like you engage in the community. And I would be in there thinking I was doing things like, hey, I'm volunteering, 2 hours a week in East Austin, reading to kids at this school. And, I've loved it. And then you'll hear about a kid. Yeah, I'm in the Bronx. I just started a nonprofit. It has this many employees. And it really made me elevate the idea of what impact looks like and elevate the expectations of what impact looks like. And then small things like I went to my first Broadway play. They would take students to a Broadway play every year. And again, from Texas, I don't want to take you back to what it was like when I was raised, but that's something that I remember when they first told me to go to Broadway. I was like, no, I'm not going to Broadway. That's not what people like me do.
Right.
I have no interest in it. I'm not going to spare you the words that I probably used at that time at 18. And I went to the first play. We had to. And it was Aida, which is a story about an Egyptian princess that gets kidnapped by an Egyptian. It's kind of a Romeo and Juliet tragedy at the end. They fall in love and et cetera. But it had so much of our culture in it. Like I remember the song before intermissions called The Gods Love Nubia. And it felt like Cornerstone Baptist Church. And it was just moving. So you have all these kids, maybe a little machismo, maybe a little like, we're guys, we don't go to Broadway plays, we go to football games, we go to the bathroom, and we're looking at each other like, man, like,
this is dope.
Yeah, this is dope. What just happened?
Right.
Like, so when you think about just shattering the world, your view of the world, and then raising the expectations of what it means to be a part of a community, that started, I don't want to say it started, but it was accelerated there in a way that shaped the whole rest of my life. From that point on, decisions that I've made has been rooted in how do I impact others? And then I'm trying to take my kids to do things that were different. And even the types of food I started eating. I'm going to try something different. Now, I just changed this box that I had put myself in growing up in the community that I grew up in. Yeah. It's not an issue of the community. It's just, I guess, who I was. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I hear you talking about impact. And I remember as a mentor in the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program, I was a mentor for 5 years, one boy from South Dallas.
Yeah.
And I asked him this question one time, which is, hey, if you could go anywhere in the world, anywhere, where would you like to go? If you could go for free, all expenses paid. His answer back to me was Six Flags over Texas. Yeah. And man, that crushed me deep, right? So what you're talking about with Jackie Robinson, me being a third grade Marshall Scholar myself, for the people who are doing that work, I hope that when you're listening to this, you understand it's making a real impact in people's lives, and it's a continual impact in people's lives. So I'm really proud that you are serving as a member of the board, and that you are continuing to live a life of service.
Yeah, for that foundation, I'd do anything. It's transformative, and it's the legacy they've allowed me to do things for my kids or put me in a position and provided me opportunity. Just get into school, but that development we talked about that's allowing me to do stuff for my kids that I don't think I would have been able to do otherwise. And yeah, we have no choice.
I love it, man. All right, so let's kick it off. Let's talk a little bit about school first. So you're down at the University of Texas at Austin, and for some reason, you decided to go after a degree program that's not the easiest. So that's something else, right? You have an electrical engineering degree. And most of my career, I work with electrical engineers, computer engineers, some industrial engineers, but a lot of electrical engineers working at Texas Instruments. And I'm curious, normally when you work that hard, you would think, okay, it's time to go work at TI or Samsung or Nokia or General Motors and put that to work. But you took a different path. Talk about that.
And that's the same thing my dad was asking me when I told him what my next steps were going to be. He's like, you went there, son. You were there for 5 years, too. It took me 5 years to graduate, which I think is actually not too abnormal in that program.
It's not for me.
Yeah, but he's like, all that work, and you're not going to take the job. I had a Motorola. I'm going to take you back for those. But Motorola was a semiconductor. They had phones, too, at the time. But I decided to do something else. And I think that, you learn a lot about yourself when you transition in that age, 18 to 22, at a college campus with different exposure. And one of the things I learned through my experiences is kind of identifying what my passion and purpose was. So first, let me go back to why I chose that major. I literally chose that major at a library. And I grew up in Arlington. We didn't have internet everywhere. So you had to go to the library if you wanted any kind of quality internet. And I looked up what degrees at that moment were getting paid the most after you graduate. So again, not really the best way to choose a college major, but in my circumstances, in a situation where money was always not the biggest issue, but always an issue. We didn't come from money. There wasn't a lot to throw around. So I'm going to college to get paid. Like, I'm going to get paid. I'm going to help our family. So I Googled it. And at that time, the two highest paid salaries after you graduate from college was electrical and computer engineering and chemical engineering at the time. So I chose electrical and computer engineering. And that's literally how I chose my major. So it wasn't rooted in purpose or passion. It was maybe passion for family, but it wasn't something I loved or that I knew I would love. So that's how I got into it. And I finished, and going back to, you talk about people that make a difference. Jackie Robinson made a difference, but I can talk about like my grandma, Maple, who was a sharecropper in Arkansas, right? And then hopped on a box train and settled in East Texas and raised my dad, adopted my dad in Kilgore. Adopted as part of a community. I don't want to give you all the background behind it, but she adopted my dad and raised him as her own. And my mom making the sacrifices she made to me to put me in the right schools, well, the schools she felt would give me the best opportunity. So when you get there and you're in a major, you don't really love it. It's hard. It's difficult. You're studying long hours. It's like it's so little in comparison to sharecropping or growing up in East Texas where my grandma grew up, where you're getting called all kind of names. So I endured and went through, and so that's how I chose electrical engineering.
So then you graduate, and there's this connection with Teach for America. And getting a master's program and deciding to teach. Like, walk us through that kind of period of time in your life.
Yeah, that starts with that transition. So there's a lot of transitions I had in my life. Some that I realized in the moment, and some that I was reflective. When I think about like my second grade and third grade experience, that's more me thinking about it as a motive. Like, what happened then? Okay, this happened, and putting those pieces together. And then in college, realizing, okay, this is something I want to be involved with. So I won't go all the way back to second and third grade, but if I start with college, I graduated from high school. I wasn't the top of my class, but I did well enough on SATs and rank in the classroom to get admitted into the University of Texas at Austin, into the College of Engineering. So I thought I was academically like competitive. And then I got there and realized that, I had a lot of work to do. So the way the class was situated, these letters and numbers won't mean anyone that wasn't in the College of Engineering at UT, but 408C is the first calculus. That's where I started. If you went to UT, you know that class. 408D was the second calculus. 427K was differential equations. That was the third in that series. Well, I started 408C, first calculus. There were students from other parts of Texas that were not only skipping 408C, they were skipping 408D, and they were starting in 427K and doing pretty well. I was in 408C struggling, and I took calculus in high school. Physics, I remember taking my first physics exam and getting a smooth 32 without a curve. And I didn't just wake up and take the test.
You said smooth 32.
I studied. I thought I was ready and prepared and took physics in high school. So I realized there was a significant gap between my preparation for college and certain other folks. And then when I started looking around my colleagues and my classmates, started recognizing the pattern. Like if you were from a rural part of Texas, whether it was East Texas or South Texas in the Valley, or if you're from certain urban school districts, we were at one level. And if you were at maybe a private school or a suburban affluent high school, you're in a different class. And that was another kind of awakening for me. You lose confidence, you're frustrated, you feel cheated a bit. Like, why did they get to, like, why didn't I have that type of preparation? I could have So I struggled with that, and that's when I started realizing like the educational equity or gap. It's what they called it at the time, and I wanted to just learn more about it.
Okay.
And then when you talk about people intervening, I don't want to talk too much. I literally emailed Senator West, who was still the senator at that time, and his staff person, Miss Lawana Burton, who I call Mama Burton. And the top 10% rule was highly debated in the state of Texas. Right. And I was like, can I just volunteer on your staff and I just want to learn.
This is why you're at UT?
Yeah, this is why I was a freshman at UT
during
the 78th legislative session.
Okay.
And they just took me in. I was just a volunteer intern. And then I just learned so much about the differences in funding and how it's funded across. I mean, and at that point, I started to develop this like passion for that. I still was going to do engineering. So I was taking engineering intern jobs, but it wasn't until someone else on Senator West's staff who didn't teach for America, she said, Justin, like, I know you're an engineering major, but you seem like passionate about this stuff. Have you ever heard of this program? And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do after. So I didn't take the offer to work for Motorola, and I applied and got into Teach for America, and that was the beginning of my path of education.
Yeah. So you go out to California.
Yep.
That's a leap.
Yeah.
Meaning that, you're from Texas.
Texas is not California.
Texas is not California. And, I lived in NorCal.
Yeah.
You lived in SoCal.
Yeah.
And you decided to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was it what you thought it would be? Did you gain what you wanted from that experience?
Yeah. And the leap, even then, I thought that the leap was intentional. Working as an intern in the state legislature, you saw kind of how they built the higher ed system in Texas. And one of the things they always looked at was California. If you think about California's higher ed system, they have some very, very good colleges.
A number of them.
Yeah, and not just UC Berkeley or
UC
UCLA,
Davis.
but they all are very
San
strong.
Diego.
Yeah, especially if you dig into particular specialties. Some of them, like, don't quote me on this, but like UC San Diego might be the best marine biology school in the nation. But they're very strong. But then they had the same issues we had, K through 12 public education, when you talk about the inequities. And the state legislature of Texas would talk about this. So part of it, I wanted to see like what it was like out there, one. And two, I felt like I needed to get out of Texas because Texas is almost a country in the sense that we have our own ideas on things. Sure. And again, the Jackie Robinson, going to New York and saying, oh, wow, like
there's a whole nother world.
They don't even listen to the same music. They don't know what UGK is. Like they don't listen to UGK up here. Like they listen to, Rough Riders and like stuff that I don't like. I guess we did listen to, but you realize
it's very different.
Thankful for experience like that states are very different. People are very different. We share a lot of commonalities, but so wanted to go out there for that reason and taking that lead. One of the things that I definitely learned is that it's a broad systemic issue. I remember sitting and teaching. It was hard for it. Let me back up. Teaching in general, even to date, is probably the hardest and most difficult thing I've ever done. Outside of the engineering or passing the bar or being an attorney, it is the most difficult. If teachers that are doing it well, it's just incredibly difficult. So I learned that from day one. If we have kids, right? Let's say our kids are 12. Remember when that time was? You put them in a room with like 3 or 4 of their friends and just kind of feel the vibe of that. And I put them in there with 25 of their friends in a room. And not only are they in the room, but you got to move them from point A to point B, and they have different backgrounds and experiences. And you're engaging all day with them. And our teachers, just generally across the nation, they take on an emotional weight. Like when you hear them talk about their kids, they say my kids, as if like they birthed the kids.
That's right, yeah.
Because that's how much ownership they take. And so it's mentally, physically, pedagogically, like it's hard.
Yeah.
So I learned that from the jump. And I also learned that there's just a lot of layers of issues. I remember sitting with Miss Bono, who was the English teacher at the middle school I taught at, phenomenal teacher. And she got emotional one day because she worked so hard for her kids. And, it was a challenging environment. She works so hard for her kids and they go to high school. Yeah. And you kind of lose control. Like you don't know if they're going to get another Miss Bono. And then when you talk about K through 12, it only takes one bad experience to mess up the work of a lot of Miss Bonos. So she was just really, and I was like, like this system, that's when I was like, I want to go back in the policy. So those are 2 things I think I learned. And I really gained an appreciation for the profession. And I also got an understanding that the kids, like they're kids. Like wherever you place it, the same thing. Like I grew up thinking Broadway plays were one way because no one ever raised the expectation and gave me the opportunity to see different. And our kids, they will meet your expectations. And if you don't have any, they're going to make their own.
Right. Yeah, there's a actual theory for that. I cannot remember the name of it, but people basically will rise and fall to the level of our expectations, which is another leadership tenet, right, to consider.
Good point.
As we are setting the bar for our employees and what have you. So one of the things I want to ask you about, you've got these 2 vectors, and maybe 3 vectors. You've got education, you've got policy / I'll call that law. So let's talk about the legal side for a second, right? So you decide, you know what, this teaching thing is real hard. The system itself, whether it's California or whether it's Texas or probably any other of the 48 states that are out there, it's a challenging system for the students, for the teachers, maybe for the administrators.
Oh, yeah.
So you decide you want to be able to make a difference in some way. So you go and you get a law degree. What's crazy, man, I was looking at this LinkedIn background, and, you know, I'm from, you know, I've spent some time in the Bay Area, so I'm used to people moving. You've made leaps at 6 different firms as an attorney.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of moving. Is there a theme?
A lot of explaining I got to do when I look at the news. Like, why are you leaving again? Like, we can't trust you, man.
Maybe not. It's becoming more and more common, as you know, in our society. But is there a theme to those leaps that you've made as an attorney?
Yeah, I mean, opportunity. When I think about the thread of where I'm at now and the shoulders where I stand on, like a lot of it's just opportunity and then purpose, I guess. So, I mean, I have to walk through them. I left the first law firm.
You don't have to explain each one. I'm not giving an interrogation. I'm just curious.
I'm trying to figure out how to like put them on. I mean, it's opportunities and seasons. I know what I want to do, both legally. So our family, we have core values like chastity. We try to teach our kids, and it's faith, family, and impact. So each of those decisions can easily be put into one of those things.
I'm with you.
So even just like purely professional, like I don't like when people say like at work, how you doing? Oh, I'm busy. I'm not the biggest fan of that for a lot of reasons. I won't get into it. But one of the things I do like was say like I'm making a difference or I'm impactful, because anyone can be busy, but are you aligning with the organization's goals? Like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, does that align with the group's goals? Which does that align with McKesson's goals or wherever you're at? So I want to be impactful. So in order to be impactful in legal practice, I felt like I needed to have more of like a general law. I don't want to be the expert in X, Y, law. I want to be able to be a generalist, a business partner, and when I need help to go get the subject matter experts. So a lot of the law firm switching is more me trying to meet that purpose. And then some of it is just practical. As you mentioned, I served on the school board for 6 years. For that as chair, it was a significant amount of time.
And I definitely want to talk about that
for
here
me,
a little bit.
Professionally, corporate wise, and it's hard to break these things apart because it's just life, but they're both important. But the professional aspect, I can't take on the same demands and serve on that school board. So I found opportunities that allowed me to keep that balance. Continue to practice law, I felt like at a high level and doing sophisticated stuff. But that organization, knowing that, you know, I'm going to be gone these days or I'm going to be at meetings on these days. And so, yeah, I think all those shifts were me navigating like
opportunity.
Goals, opportunities, using those values as like a lens.
And I get that. And one of the things that I really value and what part of why I wanted to have you on is that I really love the way you and your family seem to be publicly and I would imagine privately committed to those values. Man, I love the way that you and your wife support one another. You know, different things that I see. It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. And that's awesome to kind of have some set of values that guide your thinking.
I'll have to talk to my wife at some point.
Okay, all right.
And I remember, I just want to say this because it helps shape like what you just said. Early on when we were dating, or I thought I was dating, I don't know if she was there yet. Some persuading to do.
That happens a lot.
That was my aim. I remember she asked me, similar question you asked me the first, like if you could do anything, what would you do? And at the time I was like, I think I would go back to teaching. And she's like, yeah, I love that. Like I'd support whatever you do. And it's the idea of finding not just partners, but like circles of people that like see and want to support your vision, don't ask you to compromise. And I think that's a really good thing for anyone who's trying to accomplish stuff, to have someone that doesn't ask them to be something they're not.
Yeah, appreciate you saying that. I think that's going to help some people that's listening. Now, because you have made these different moves, I'm sure you picked up a tip or two. As you get into the new job, you're trying to ramp, you're trying to learn, there's relationships to manage. Can you talk some about what's helped you find success at each one of these stops over the last 14 to 15 years as an attorney?
Yeah, I think relationships. I know people probably say that a lot. And then I'm just big on like shared values and goals. Like I'm very value centric. And the ability to like sit at a table and let's say there's 10 things we need to accomplish, maybe 7 of them we have some differences, like just even be able to find 2 or 3 that we agree upon and just building on that, and it might allow you to stretch, do some other things. So I think that's been critical, is just being authentic, building relationships, and just finding some common ground to build on. So whether that's serving a client, the law firm, or when I'm in-house now, like most of the people I work with are business people. So understanding their business, building the relationships, having them understand that they can trust me. And it's not fake. I don't know how to intentionally want, like I want to know about folks. And I think
Yeah.
if you don't feel like you want to know about folks, I think it's going to be difficult for you to be successful, because people are also very intuitive on who's just transactional and who's really here to support them. So I think spending time and understanding that stuff is important, like the blocking and tackling, even with school. So, I mean, it's just, you can try to educate a student and just come in and say, sit down, we're going to start doing this math. But if you build a relationship and take that time up front, later on, it's going to pay huge dividends. The same thing at work. I think just being intentional, just caring about people, their lives, what they do this weekend, what's their favorite movie, what's something they would do, these types of things, hard to measure, if you can even measure them, but they make a difference. So I think that's really, I think it's even helped me transition to other jobs. So when I'm out there looking for other jobs, I don't even have to, some of those jobs came just because, I remember him, and the work has to be good enough. I don't think you need to be the best. I think your work should be good enough. I know some people might disagree with that, but if they trust you and when they think of your name, that gives them a positive feeling, and they're looking for someone at the firm. So I'm thinking like a lady left and became GC of a company.
GC meaning general counsel.
General counsel, yeah. And she came back to the firm and was like, "Do you want to come with me?" Like, well, she could have chose
anyone,
other people,
right?
And I don't think my work was like way better than anyone. I don't think it was way worse either. Like we can go toe to toe there, but we had built a relationship and a level of trust where she felt confident in doing that. And I think a lot of opportunities happen that way.
All right, so here's leadership tenet number 2 for those listening. Relationships matter.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, I just, in my newsletter maybe a week or two ago that I released, that was actually my title. I think I said relationships are everything.
Yeah.
And you're speaking to the fact that whether you're the very, very best at what you do, you got to be probably at least good enough, whatever that good enough standard is, wherever you're working, in whatever industry you're working in. But it's about how you make people feel when you show up and you're involved. And do they trust you to give you this set of work or give you this client or give you this activity and believe that you're going to do right with it? That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah. And even do right, when I say good enough, do right. I was just at a conference, I told you, and one of the GCs was on the panel, and she was talking about, she hires outside counsel. She doesn't even go to some of the meetings. And someone asked her, like, why, like, how do you, one of the other GCs was like, how do you trust someone else to go meet with your business people?
Right.
And she started telling all these stories about before she became GC and just the person's character, things that person did, looking out for other people or flagging stuff. All she did was speak about this. And she's like, I just know the person's character. I put them in my business and I know that I can trust them there. And it's not I'm sure that person's super smart, but she didn't talk about, they were honors or they were law review or they were the smartest person or no. It's competitive out there. There's a lot of people that are good enough. Lawyers, engineers, there's a lot of people that are good enough. But there's not always a lot of people with enough of those character traits where someone can leave the room and say, you got it.
Yeah.
That was a big takeaway for me, actually, from the conference. Like,
and it's actually interesting that you're saying this, Justin, because there's a lot of electrical engineers that I've worked with who think robotically in some instances. And they have their formula and they say that, X plus Y minus Z plus X squared equals Pythagorean theorem, et cetera, right? They operate as if they're looking at a textbook or on a chalkboard solving math problem. And while you have a strong technical capability, there's no question, you cannot get an electrical engineering degree and go through all those calc classes and differential equations and everything else and not be, and not have some brain power. So it's not an absence of brain power. For those listening, it's the fact that you also believe there's something else, right? I could be the very best. I could be law review. I could have clerked for Supreme Court Judge XYZ. That may or may not be the thing that gets me the next opportunity that enables me to make an impact.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And I didn't do litigation, but those folks that clerk for the judges, those judges are appointed, right? And they're not appointed based on their GPA. They were good enough. I'm sure they were on somebody's law review, but they have a relationship with someone that says, I trust you to sit in that seat. And those are federal appointments. They sit there. A lot of those are lifelong. But I agree. I need to sign up for your newsletter. Are we going to plug that today?
We just might. All right, let's go down this other vector. So again, there's education, there's law, there's policy. And I'm just curious how your experience as a teacher, and we'll talk in a second about your actual experience on the Board of Trustees, because I think that's very relevant. But before we get there, just what did you learn from a skill set perspective as a teacher that you've been able to bring to your work as an attorney, whether you're in-house or whether at an actual firm?
Yeah, time management for sure. I had 6 periods of students, and you only have a certain amount of time with them. And again, 28 to 30-ish students. They all have individual development places where you're trying to get them to. They're not starting in the same place. So you have to be, teachers, again, it's so difficult. You have to be very efficient with their time. You have a class of a student where a student is, I don't like certain terms to describe students, but a high performer doesn't maybe need a lot of assistance. And then you have another student that is struggling to do their times tables in 7th grade, and they're all in a class. You might have a student that has other exceptional learning needs. So teachers have to be just, it's not impossible, but they have to be very efficient with their time.
Efficiency.
Very efficient.
Yeah.
You have to do a lot of planning on the front end, long-term planning, like I need to end the year here. What are all the things I need to do? Backwards planning to day one of school. And then again, back to the culture and relationship stuff, I learned that you don't want to start with content. There needs to be a significant, in my opinion, a significant amount of time on the front end developing culture. These are our norms. These, working with the class together, these are our behavioral expectations, not mine, ours. And it really helped me on the board, actually. Something learning way back then. But, our rules and our consequences, they weren't mine. They were ours. We talked about it in the class. And they were simple. There weren't like 10 of them. There were like 3. Be respectful. I don't remember what they were, but so time management and spending time on building a empowering collective culture, not top down, but, and it's still, there's a hierarchy. I'm still the teacher. You're still a teacher in the room with 12 and 13-year-olds, but the more you include them, the more they own it and the easier it is to manage it. I don't have to say, this is my rules, this is our rules. Like, you're violating our norms. I didn't say it that way because I was younger.
With hindsight being 2020 and having maturity and all that, right? We would all go back and do things a little bit differently. But I get your point. What you're trying to establish with the room is that it's all of us together.
Yes.
As opposed to I'm the leader and you all are just my underlings. Do what I say.
Yeah. And these are our goals. We had our big goals on. These are our goals. That we all know, we're transparent about. So we should, theoretically be helping each other. So
Hey listeners, if you're busy, and I know you are, but you want to grow your leadership in an efficient and cost-effective way, I invite you to check out my on-demand digital leadership courses at bonafideleaders.com/courses. Now, you're wondering, what do I get in exchange for my purchase? Well, you'll get dynamic teaching and insights, and you'll leave with the tools and practical application you need to be a more effective and impactful leader, wherever you lead, at work or at home. You'll become more confident in your capabilities because you'll know your unique leadership style and how to apply it. You will know how to create powerful and engaging meetings and also how to better integrate your work and life. You'll get that and much, much more. Now, if that weren't enough, with your purchase, as my gift to you, you'll also be added to the Digital Bonafide Leaders community, a real community of leaders like you for networking, best practice sharing, and you'll have direct access to me. Go to the website and you'll find a link in the show notes, and you'll get instant access today.
All right, let's talk about this juicy stuff, man. Let's get into talking about this board stuff. We talked just a few minutes before we got on. First of all, people who don't know anything about being a member of a school ISD or what have you, it's an elected situation. So you got to run for office. And talked about media training right before we jumped on. But man, I'm just really curious because I'm thinking like, whoa, I don't know that I could ever do something like that. And you were, a young man, and you still are a young man. What went into just even the thought? Take me back to like 2016, 17, even before you ran. What was going through your mind, your heart, as you were just contemplating the idea? Like, what was that about?
I didn't have to even go before we started running because we again, going back to the story of college and teaching, finding a way to make a difference was important. And then there's a specific community that I'm from and that I care about. And so it wasn't like I just woke up and ran. I was spending a significant amount of time serving and volunteering and understanding our community and finding ways to serve our community. And frankly, I'm so biased now, but just developing, I don't even know the word for like a deep, unabashed like passion. Like I don't take it offensive, but if you're going to talk about Dallas ISD or particularly the district that I was honored to represent during my time on the board, you're going to get some pushback from me. Like, I don't like the satellite criticism. If you haven't been there, if you haven't walked the block, if you haven't visited one of our
satellite
schools,
criticism?
Yeah, if you haven't talked to one of our principals or our parents or done some home visits, then you need to be thoughtful about what you say.
You said that very well.
So spend a lot of time, and then the thing that ran, I want to be respectful of the dynamics of our community as possible. Because I think we're stronger together. Sounds like a political strong. There were just, I'll make it a broad kind of maybe. I was with a friend, Byron Sanders, a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
We were with our families, and we both follow education very closely, and we're engaged. We still are to this day, and we probably will be because that's something we just care about. There was a meeting, and there's 9 members of the board, single member districts that represent different parts of town, different politically too. And there was an issue that they all effectively agreed upon. The opportunity to put a vote before voters to provide more funding to the schools via a tax ratification election. What they disagreed upon was the amount. And we were watching the meeting and it went south. It became pretty petty. You didn't vote for mine, I'm not going to vote for yours. And at the end of the day, they didn't vote on anything. So the voters were not given the opportunity to put any more money in the public schools, and we needed it desperately. And that was a moment where I felt like I needed to run. So that was the trigger. And I felt like I wanted to run because I wanted to change that temperament. I wanted kids, any kid, my kids, to walk into that board meeting and see those folks are like laser focused on specific goals and not spending time on the things that we're inevitably always going to disagree upon. There's just going to be disagreements in life. Are we going to spend time there? Or are we going to spend time on the things that we can move forward? And in my mind, potentially build momentum to start doing some of these other things. Well, I know maybe we didn't disagree so much on this issue. Like, but you have to start somewhere. And that's, frankly, I told Brian, like, I'm running. and probably should have put more thought into it in that moment, and we didn't turn back. And then it's a lot of feelings and emotions around that because there's relationships, including with the trust, because I ran against the incumbent, the trustee that was sitting. There's some dynamics there, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an election.
Yeah,
whether it's student council in elementary school. There's feelings that's gonna get hurt. There's gonna be a winner. And there's gonna be a loser. That's just the way it is. That's life. You know, you're not necessarily trying to be mean, but there's gonna be a determined winner and somebody who doesn't win. Let me ask you about the process of running, because one of the things that I talk about as an instructor at the SMU Cox School of Business, I teach MBAs there, and there's a particular example I use. It's a political example, but I'm not attempting to be political. I'm talking about the strategy that's involved to have success in an election. So can you talk a little bit about what went into your strategy, which to me, I'd imagine requires a significant amount of leadership, planning, relationship management, and it had to shape and further develop and refine your leadership skills. Can you just talk about just the actual campaign itself and what you gained from that?
Yeah, there's a lot to political campaigning. In particular, running against an incumbent. I'm gonna be on the record, like the incumbent, great person. I'm not. Running against the incumbent is rare, and it's hard to beat incumbents. And it's hard to beat incumbents in the city of Dallas. There's a certain. I'll just leave it at that.
Establishment. We got it. We understand.
It's so, man, so many lessons. The first thing is really rooting yourself on who you are and why you're running. If you are not completely honest and dig deep into that and being really honest with yourself, over time it can cause some issues. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the story, like how am I even here in this seat right now? Why is this important to me? Why are we doing this? Who am I? And all that ends up coming into like building the message, but it requires a high level, like 360 surveys.
Oh, absolutely.
In business. So bringing people around you, like, what are positive things about me? What are negative things about me? What are things you think people are going to say about me that are good? What about bad? And like just this whole reflective understanding of who you are, not how I think I am, but how people just trying to get a whole, like a big view of who you are. And then outside the blocking and tackling, and that's important too, because there comes a point, like people say, I'm gonna run. Comes a point where people start saying all kinds of things about you. You're bought and paid for because you're not particularly from that area of Dallas, or just, and then you look at the track record and you're like, where is that? And you can spend time engaging in that and going back, or you can say, no, I'm who I am. I'm just gonna tell my story and we're gonna keep moving forward. But if you feel uncomfortable or unsure, or you're lying to yourself, frankly, you'll get drawn off sides and start having those arguments. So like when I see stuff online or someone would send me stuff online, I would just go back to knocking on doors or something. Like I'm gonna go face to face with people and have conversations, because there's just a lot of noise. So my point is get rooted in who you are, and that's good for after you get elected too, because there's a lot of power is tough. I'm not saying that we were president of the United States, but anytime you get in these places of influence, I think it extenuates who you are.
It's good, man.
And if you didn't start toiling with that, and I have flaws, so I have to toil with those flaws up front, because if I don't, when I get here, those flaws are going to become a problem.
I want you to expand on that a little bit. That's one of the things that I teach a lot when I'm doing leadership development, is that you want to have been tested before you get into the battle.
Oh, yeah.
And so many people are in such a rush to get the title, to get the money. And I caution people, and there's people I've held back
Mm.
because I look at them and I say, I look at your track record. Where's your testing?
Yeah.
You don't want to have that first test when you're in the big power
Mm.
position.
Mhm.
Just talk a little bit more about that.
Man, it's critical. I mean, I just agree. And there are some things that I didn't vet up front. And I feel like when I started on the board were my biggest mistakes. And I didn't test myself enough in that space. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm running for school board. If you look at my background, right, I'm passionate about educational equity. I'm passionate about the education side of it. Well, that's not just what school board is.
Yeah.
We hire and fire the superintendent. We approve the budget. There's a financial aspect. There's a real estate aspect. I didn't toil with that stuff as much. So one of my biggest decisions, I don't think I was intentional as I should have been with community conversations around like a real estate transaction process. That was just like procedural. It's always been done this way. And I didn't spend the time up front to do the diligence. I was really good at most of the other stuff, I feel like. So no, I think that's key. And I think I like that you held some people back. You need, man, where are we gonna go with this? You need people around you to do what you said. And what we need in our community, now I'm talking, what I think is helpful in our community. I'm not gonna act like I have the answers. We need transitions. We need the spread of the wealth of knowledge because you can't kill knowledge. When I transitioned, I knew I wasn't gonna run. Even before then, we started having conversations and pulling people in. We had task force meetings. I had people chairing different things just to get people to understand the things that I didn't understand when I started running. But given the dynamics of running as a incumbent, there wasn't necessarily a clean, that's my fault too, right? There wasn't let's sit down and talk about what it's like to be a trustee. So I had to take that learning and that failure, which I think is my biggest, I don't think it was intentional, but that's one thing I look back, I wish I could have changed that process. But I know like that's not gonna happen again for the next person. In fact, there was an article released yesterday about another property transaction, and it mentioned that how we started a task force 9 months ago to start talking about what's going to happen with this property. And I'm not going to name the people. It's involving pastors and community leaders, and we have a task force. I'm not on the board, I'm saying we, and that trustee was a part of that task force, the new trustee. So you need people around you to help you see and understand stuff you don't even know. Yeah. So no, I agree with what you said 100%. But
all right, that's leadership tenet number 3, dropped by Brother Justin, whether he realizes it or not, which is a 360 can be a really useful tool.
Yeah.
And as an executive coach, of course, that's something that I deploy with just about every one of my clients because it's giving them some insight to hear the stuff that they probably don't want to hear, including me, having gone through multiple 360s myself. But it's stuff I need to hear.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to become more effective at what I'm doing. So that's leadership principle number 3, y'all. You just heard it. All right, let's talk about this period of your life. And you touched on it a little bit earlier. When you are a trustee, and not only a trustee, but you're president of the board of trustees for one of the largest districts in the country, and you have a full-time job, and you're married, and you have children, and you have the rest of life going on, I'm just wondering, what did you do, whether intentional or unintentional, to sort of structure your life in a way that enables you to be effective in all the different buckets that you had to be effective in? Yeah,
so one is I had to compartmentalize stuff. Like my time with my kids was my time with my kids. And I just couldn't, I was transparent with this. People I serve with and, administrators, principals, community members, often they probably could tell you this. I have glass balls and rubber balls. And I didn't make this up. I don't know where I got this from. But glass balls are the things that you drop and they fracture. And you can try your best to try to glue them together, but it's just not going to work. Rubber balls, you can use physics and engineering. You drop a rubber ball, it'll bounce. It won't bounce up to the same potential, but it will bounce. You can maybe catch it, you might not. And I want to talk about that might not, because that's very critical, I think, for people in leadership that I'm struggling with. And I was talking to a former city councilman, the same thing. Those glass balls are like my family. It's not a lot of things. My kids, if I'm at their soccer practice or their game, I'm just not engaging with anyone else. I need them to know they don't care what school board issues going on. Like, you're either here or you're not. So that's one way. And then it was a challenge. It's probably the deepest challenge because issues come up. And the second piece, that's just the consequence, I think, that I'm realizing I'm struggling with. Like, even through therapy and reading, is just like, let me back up. Me and my wife now are in what we call a harvest season. And it's trying to sow in to the people and friends that were always there for us. People that donated to my campaign the first time when no one knew if I was even going to run, or people I grew up with, or like close friends from college, etc. Because that was a cost for me that I don't think I appreciated. So and I don't know if I'm gonna get them back. Those might be rubber balls that I don't get back, but I'm struggling with that, right? Because there's only so much time in a day, and when I compartmentalized like that, there was cost. So honest, I think if you're going to take a leadership position in the sense that you don't always get to control your time, there might be a community meeting, there might be a pandemic outbreak for 2 years.
Yeah.
There might be all these other things that happened in the course of those 6 years. I think you can try to be intentional on the front end, but if not, there's going to be a cost. So that's one thing that we're moving into in regards to that season. That's one of the things we're trying to do. If I'm going to a town and my friends are there, I'm trying to connect with them more.
Yeah.
So that's an honest truth. But it's funny, I was talking to another former counsel person. Like, yeah, I'm having the same. So I'm almost curious how many folks have experienced that. You're serving, which you feel like is in your passion, the community level, spending so many time with so many people, but the people that were and are still like very meaningful to you, you don't have a lot of time. You didn't have a lot of time for them. You didn't make a lot of time for them. So yeah, that's something I think I'm working on now. But it even family, like one of the people asked, why didn't you or maybe run for something else, or even during those times, or why didn't you stay on the board? There's consequences. I see people in our community more than I see my mom who's getting older, or more than I see my dad who's getting older. And at the end of the day, if something were to happen to them, I don't know how I would toy with that.
Right.
So it might be too odd of an answer, but
No.
I compartmentalized.
Yeah.
I focused on the goals that I wanted to achieve as far as the school board and getting us in a good place, and focused on family and work. And I think other things I didn't do as good of a job as I probably could have. Yeah.
I appreciate your vulnerability because that's real, what you're describing. A lot of people want the leadership opportunity, but a lot of people aren't fully aware of the cost of the leadership opportunity. And it's beautiful in the sense that you get to make an incredible impact. And I will tell you publicly, man, thank you for your service. I mean, as a Black man in the classroom teaching math, and 6 years serving the community of Dallas, right, in a very difficult period, one we haven't seen perhaps since the 1960s, leading through that period. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate your commitment to service, and I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability about there's another side of this thing too. I think somebody's gonna take that rubber ball and glass ball. It's not me.
I don't know where I took it from. I wish I did. And I mean, I remember like I was going to my last. Was it the last meeting? No, it was after the election. So after the new trustee was elected, I was talking to my mom. She said, "So it's over. Like it's done." Like she was. And I was like, "Yeah, Mom. Like he won. It's over. Like you know." And her response to me was, "Good. I hope we can get lunch more." And I'm not gonna get emotional, but like that was a signal and solidifying. Like, yes, I love our community. I still do. Like,
absolutely. That's not gonna die.
It's not gonna die.
Right.
But that my mom, my mom would never say that because she's the one when I went to LA. She's like, you care about kids, go do it.
She
like,
supports you.
Live in your purpose. So she would never, I'm not gonna get emotional. She would never, while I'm in that seat, say you should stop. She's gonna just support you. Keep making, keep doing what you feel like is your purpose. But it's just funny how as soon as she knew that, like it was, she didn't like. She was like, "Good, we can have lunch more now."
Yeah, that's good.
And that's important to me in this season.
I love it. All right, so there's a few more things just to wrap up with that I want to get to, which is, man, you've taken incredible journeys and incredible leaps from leaving Texas to go to California to deciding I'm going to leave electrical engineering and I'm going to focus on the law. And then I'm going to work at these different firms. I mean, each one, and then I'm going to go and run for office. Yeah. Of all the leaps that you've taken, which has been the scariest at the time before you actually jumped? Which of the leaps has been like the most nerve-wracking, scariest, riskiest?
It's tough. I would say running for office. It's just a lot of vulnerability, I think, that you have to open yourself up to criticism from people, from the media. I mean, from the news. That's where the media training comes in, from people in the community that you see frequently. You have to go to people's stories. It's just a lot of vulnerability. You just, people can say whatever they want to say, and it's public. Like, it's just out there. And so that was a jump. Yeah. That was definitely a jump. I'm not, this sounds like a typical, I'm not the most comfortable. I don't think anyone I was having conversations with was like, he's, the most charismatic. Sometimes you get this feel from elected officials. I didn't like asking people for money. Like, you have to ask for money when you're running for office. I'm more comfortable telling like who I am as opposed to asking for stuff. And you have to ask for a lot. You have to ask for money. You have to ask for someone's vote. You have to ask for someone's support. You have to ask for someone's endorsement.
Yeah.
So that was, me kind of getting out of my wife says I am extrovert. I guess I am extrovert, but I don't feel like I could be very fine just by myself for a while. I'm not gonna be like the life of the party, I don't think. Or, you know, I'm just not.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever been like that. I've never been the coolest of my friends, in my opinion.
You know what my daughter calls that? She says she's an ambivert. Have you heard that
Ambivert?
term?
No,
Yeah. So the
I'm good with
ambivert is like somewhere in between introvert and extrovert. Like we're cool to hang with people.
Yeah.
We're also cool to be by ourselves.
Yeah, that's me. But that was and the other one I was thinking about was just child having the kids. But I don't think that was as scary. I just remember like optimism there.
Yeah.
We have a lot of support. Like Chastity's parents are still here, mine are around. That was more like I'm excited to have a kid. Running for office, like, man, I don't know if I like this. Should we still do this? Like I didn't think I ever questioned. Like it was scary for other reasons. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to be a dad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But go back to that for a second, because I think the people who are listening can maybe learn something from you. There were moments when you doubted, when you were like, man, I don't know. I mean, maybe you've raised the money you need to, maybe you had the support you need to, but now you're thinking, yeah, I might actually win.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, what kept you going?
There are people that, my purpose, like, again, really getting rooted early. Like, this is why we're doing it. So when you're in that moment, you go back to this is why. And in that another challenging moment, or someone says something or something gets misconstrued, this is why.
Yeah.
It wasn't to please these 10 people. It was to make a difference on that board for these, at this time, 150,000 kids. I'm just a very values and purpose just are everything. And then also, again, going back to my mom advocating for me and my grandma getting world, like there are people, DeMarcus Offord was one of them, Jamie Molina. I had a small circle of people that started this campaign, and they believed that I could win before
you believed.
I did, which is wild, but it's true. So, you know, I think as confident as you might think you are, it's important that you have people that believe in your potential. And they, you know, there's times where I needed reassurance and they were there. I don't get elected without them, both of them.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like picking them. We talked about what you do in a campaign, not picking them, but like that, you pick your team.
Yes.
Their stories, I mean, they were just as committed to that core value from their stories. Like I don't want to get into Jamie's story, being from an immigrant family. DeMarcus grew up in sunny South Dallas. They cared just as much about educational equity and the opportunity that comes from it as I did. They helped mitigate the fears. And another way to get around fear is just to work. Like you get anxiety and fear, instead of dwelling in it, like what's the next thing to do?
Get to work.
Yeah, what's the next thing to do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a couple things that jumped out just now, and for those listening, don't know if you heard them, but getting outside of your comfort zone was something that was important. Taking leaps of faith and steps that felt uncomfortable, yet pushing through them to get on to the other side. That was critical. All right, so last couple things here. Being a board member, an attorney, managing big cases, even being in a classroom, wondering, man, will I fail one of these kids? Like, you know, there can be a lot of stress in our job and in our lives. I'm curious, what's been your approach? What's your approach even right now to just managing the stress and anxiety that comes with living?
Yeah, I'm big on mental health. I haven't had a session in a while, but I need to. But I think mental health is key. I think the same way you go to the gym, work out to build your heart or your muscles, like the mind dictates everything. Like your mind is, it can put you in a great place, it can put you in a bad place, and everywhere in between. And understanding like why you feel the way you feel and how things in the past have impacted your present, I think is critical. I think finding places of like joy and peace for whatever that looks like for you. I'm a Cowboy fan. That's not it for me. But like my daughter's soccer games, my son's soccer games, like going there and turning the phone off and just watching them play is very good for like managing the anxiety and stress I might have. So yeah, just good time with authentic people. But I think it's important. It's tough to manage at times. I'm trying to think of the darkest times, or the most difficult and stressful times, and understanding priorities, things that matter, things that don't. Things that matter and things that matter the most. One of the things we talk about in our family a lot is like separating fact from fiction. It's very building anxiety. You want to plan for the future, but building a lot of anxiety around fiction instead of focusing on what's in front of you right now.
Right. And that's hard to do with social media, but it's something that even I coach my clients on. We call it, or I call it catastrophizing. Yeah. Where you're imagining the worst case possible scenario. What are all these people saying about me? And you know what? Most of the time it turns out people not really even thinking about shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. One, that's true. And then, you know, there's opportunities to go to people. I remember there was something that happened. There was just all this talk on this social media page about the issue. And then I would go, this is back in the campaign, I'd go knock on doors and like,
what are you talking about?
Yeah, we got you. Like, so... Yeah, I mean, but I think everyone needs to find a way to make sure they're staying level.
Love it. All right, last question. Let me throw this out to you. Our listeners are in one of three places. So they might be comfortable where they are. Life is good. Like you say, maybe it's a harvest season, right?
Yeah.
From a professional perspective, I'm just harvesting right now, right?
Yeah.
Flowing. The next group is that group that's in the middle of a move right now. They have just changed companies. They are learning, man, and they're just drinking from a fire hose. And then that first group is, I'm not quite ready to make a move, but I'm starting to think about it. I'm contemplating. I'm wondering, should I go and apply for this or that? Talk to those last two groups, if you would. What would you say to those who are contemplating a move or those who are in the middle of one? What tips would you leave for them?
I think, I don't want to merge the two, but I think, and maybe this is indicative of my resume, but I think you should always be ready to move. I don't think, and now I'm strictly professional business, I don't think the corporate world is what it used to be. You know, people aren't staying at companies 23, you're not getting a pension. I think you should always be ready to move in the sense that you're developing skills and attributes and things that are transferable. And then two, you don't, I'm thinking about my own, you don't get to pick when opportunity comes. You don't know when someone's going to call and say, I need a CFO.
Right.
You don't know when someone's going to post on LinkedIn that this perfect job for you. So I think both like developing the skills where you are, but also being prepared, like keep your resume ready. Like,
right.
I think that's prudent whether you are just moving, you just moved or you're thinking about moving, because you don't get to pick the timing of opportunities. If we did, we'd all be exactly where we wanted to be. So I would say that for both groups. The group in the middle that just transitioned, I still go back to relationships. Understanding the relationships. Businesses are so different depending on what they are, but understanding the relationships within the business is very important. I hate that I sound like disloyal or something. It's not disloyal. I just don't think you pick. Even the same has happened for my wife. Like, she doesn't go after jobs. People hear about stuff she's doing and she gets approached. And one of those approaches might be, she has goals, things she wants to be just a GC of a public company that's a Fortune 100 company. If they call tomorrow, she needs to be ready to compete for that opportunity. And I'd say that whatever your goal is, you should always be ready to compete for that next step. So that's what I would say to people that are thinking about.
All right, so this is now leadership tenet number 4 or 5. I lost count.
Yeah.
That one is, it's like my daughter's dance teacher at school says, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And it's not hard incrementally. Like, you do a new thing on the job. Okay, I'm gonna add it to my resume. Like,
right.
I now have this regulatory experience across different businesses, or now I have this experience, and just, you don't want to get comfortable. And then the flip side of that is, companies, they don't. No, they might run into hard times themselves.
Absolutely.
They're not. They don't.
Nothing lasts forever.
Fidelity is to their shareholders.
Absolutely.
Depending on the structure of the company, and they're not disloyal either. But both parties need to be continually evaluating where they are. What you don't want to be is something happens and you weren't ready either to take the next job, or God forbid you lose a job.
Right.
Now you're figuring things out. Yeah. So I guess going back to the part I'm talking about, the person in the middle, I would be constant, like, where do I want to be? What skill set and experience do I need to be there? And within that business, try to get those things. Okay, right. I need experience. I'm thinking legal. Like, I need experience supporting the business and looking at the P&Ls. Well, is there a way you could do that within your company? Try to get yourself around that opportunity. Oh, I need regulatory experience, which is transferable, whether it's healthcare or whatever. Okay, find a way to get into that. So just constant, always be ready.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And that speaks also to where we are in our society, which is the idea of flexible learning.
Yeah.
With automation picking up and artificial intelligence, which I am an avid user of.
Yes.
I actually did a search on perplexity.ai for this, just to see what it would say about a question I was going to ask you about how your background contributed to your role on the board of trustees.
Yeah.
It did a decent job, but I thought, let me talk to the actual man himself and see what he has to say. So look, Justin, this has been fantastic, man.
I want to see what the answer was. I want to see
I'll show you.
I got to see that.
But yeah, we started with Jackie Robinson and the impact that's made in your life, and we've gone to California and come back to Texas. This has been a lot of fun, man.
I appreciate it. It's been great fun, and I appreciate the time and the great questions. Obviously, I knew that was coming. I was kind of nervous, but yeah, I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this podcast, don't keep it a secret. Subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share it with someone you know. Until next time, remember, our world is starving for bona fide leaders. Take your leadership to the next level by applying at least one thing you heard today.